Well, hello again. I said during the last video that I would do a short teaching about the I am sayings, and that's what this is going to be. I just want to point this out that it's something that occurs all the way through John's Gospel, and it's a very significant device. It's not just in John's Gospel, it's elsewhere in the New Testament. We'll talk about that. But it's all connected with what you may know as the divine name. Okay? Now, to understand this, we need to rewind a little bit. So let's go back to the Old Testament. And if you remember Exodus 3:14, God says to Moses, I am who I am. Okay? Now, in Hebrew, that looks like this. Vayomer Elohim el Moshe Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Okay? So you can see that Ehyeh is highlighted with I am there in the English. Okay? Now, the key to understanding this is that a lot of people will say, oh, but the name of God, that means I am. Strictly speaking, no, because Ehyeh means I am. It's in the next verse that you get the well-known version of God's name, which is Jehovah or Yahweh. Okay, in the next verse, you'll notice that it says that God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord. Okay, and the Lord is actually translated with what we know as the divine name, Yahweh. The tetragrammaton, the 4 letters. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Yahweh actually means He is. So often people say, oh, God's name, Yahweh, it means I am, and actually that's a mix-up because Ehyeh means I am, Yahweh means He is. Okay, now this is a significant thing because as you probably know, the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20 verse 7, it says, do not use the Lord's name in vain. Yahweh being assumed to be the Lord's name, because he says here, this is my name for all generations. So the Jews, being sort of with a Pharisaical mindset, they decided to put a hedge around it. So they said, well, just in case I use it by accident in vain, I better not use it at all. So it became blasphemy even to utter the name of God, even to say Yahweh. Actually, when you see Abraham having conversations with God, he just referred to him as Yahweh like it was his first name, like my name's Gerry, you know. But, you know, it became such a significant thing for the Jews that became a real problem to say. What's also interesting is that when they translated this Hebrew into Greek for the Septuagint, about 200 years or so before Christ, they used the words ego eimi, right? So then ego eimi became wrong to say, okay, in their way of thinking, right? They just had to avoid using it under any circumstances. And it's this ego eimi that Jesus actually uses, okay? So he says in 4:26, Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. And in the Greek it says ego eimi ho lalon soi. He is, or I am, I should say, sorry, I'm getting myself muddled up. I am the one speaking to you, or the one who speaks to you. All right. Now, in the Old Testament, you had these names attached to Yahweh. Now, if Yahweh means He is, you could attach something to it, and it became a meaning of its own. You know, so for example, you'd have Yahweh Jireh, which meant the Lord will provide. So he's the Lord who provides, my God who provides. He is the one who provides, if you translate it literally. And, you know, elsewhere he's called the God who is here, Yahweh, Rapha, the God who heals. He is the one who heals you and all that kind of stuff. And you see this mechanism being used here by Jesus. All right. I am, which is this very significant term, the one who speaks to you. All right. So, you know, it's not just saying, oh yeah, it's me, right? It's like, you know, talking to the woman in that context. Yeah, that's me. He's actually saying something much more profound. He's actually saying to her, you know, I am the God who is speaking to you, because he was obviously, you know, God speaks to everybody through the Spirit, and so therefore you have this drawn out. Now then, there are, in fact, a large number of these all the way through John's Gospel, okay? And if you look into the notes, if you've downloaded those from the website, then you'll see a few key passages, okay? And it is very significant. Now, sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not. It's not obvious in John 4. And I just wonder, knowing John as I do now, that he wrote it in a subtle way so that the person who's reading it for the first time would look at that, if they were, aware of the Old Testament protocol with not using the name of God, and they might look at John 4 and think, did he mean to write that? So it's a bit of a mystery at that point. As it goes on, it becomes a lot more obvious. When you get to 8:58, he says, before Abraham was, I am. And they turn around, they want to stone him. Right? So it's quite clear that it's a really, really powerful expression. And they take unction with it. They take it badly. Now, just statistically, it's interesting. There are 32 ego emis in the New Testament, okay, and nearly all of them are in John. 4 in the Book of Revelation, and 20 are in the Gospel, okay. All of them are in the mouth of Jesus, except for John 9:9, and that's the blind man. When he says "I am," he says who he is, but otherwise, they're all in the mouth of Jesus. Okay, so I'm not going to go through these one by one because this would take us all over the place. But in 4:26, as we've just read, I am the one who speaks to you. And in 6:20, I am, do not be afraid. I am the bread of life. I am the living bread. I am the light of the world. I am the witness about myself. Okay, so you can see there that there are some very significant I am sayings associated with things that we have as titles for Jesus. He's the bread of life. I am the door for the sheep in chapter 10. I am the good shepherd. These are all famous sayings, aren't they? And you might not have realised that behind them was the divine name. Okay, and they're just as significant as those Old Testament ones like Jehovah Jireh or Yahweh Yireh. Okay, I am the resurrection, and I am the way, the truth, and the life. I think that's probably one of the most famous ones of all. I am the true vine. He also says it in the Garden of Gethsemane when they come to arrest him, and it says that they all drew back and fell. Now, there are some people who have tried to say that they fell back out of shock that he would say the divine name. I don't think so, because I think that those men were up for a fight, and they were not in some kind of self-righteous tizzy. I think they fell back involuntarily. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get to chapter 18. And there are other occurrences in the other Gospels. This one in particular is a favourite of mine. This is at the trial of Jesus, and the high priest says, identify yourself, and he says, I am, and you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds, and the high priest tears his clothes and shouts, blasphemy. And there's nothing he says in there that could be counted as blasphemy except for ego eimi at the beginning of those lines. All right, so quite clearly the high priest thinks he's said the divine name, he's ready to execute him, and it appears elsewhere in the book of Acts, and like we said in the book of Revelation as well. All right, again, all in the mouth of Jesus. All right, so it's quite interesting to see how it's used. I recommend that you look them all up and use this list, because I have to give a warning, right? And I ran into trouble with this once before. Somebody thought that wherever they saw the words I am in the English Bible, that it meant that Jesus was uttering the divine name. And of course, actually, that's in virtually every sentence, right? It doesn't apply everywhere. It's only where the Greek text has the words ego eimi. All right. It doesn't matter. For example, I've put an example here in John 8 verse 23. He says, "I am from above." Okay. He does not use the words "I am," ego eimi there. All right. And there are other examples like "I am going here," or "I am going there," or "I am eating." It's because English uses that all the time for the present tense. All right. So limit your studies to these verses which I've listed here. These are the only occurrences, there are 32 of them, of ego eimi in the New Testament in Greek. Okay, don't get carried away by English translations, because I've seen people make a dreadful hash of things by running away with it and thinking that ego eimi was in every verse of the New Testament, and it's really not. It's only in 32 places. All right, so I just throw that out there as a warning. Just be steady. If you're not sure about something, then send me a message. All right, put a comment in the video or whatever it takes, but do contact me first and I'll confirm for you which verses are applicable. All right, so I hope that helps. I hope that clears up a few things, and I hope it opens up quite a bit of John's Gospel for you, because the I am sayings are very significant. And as we go on, we'll bring that back up and we'll look at the patterns, see where they're used, see what they're trying to say, see how they relate to things in the Old Testament with the name of God in the Old Testament, Yahweh. And I hope that helps. If you're puzzled about any details on the Hebrew, then contact me and I'll do a separate video with a bit of Hebrew grammar if you want me to take Exodus 3 apart and try to sort of clarify exactly what I'm teaching. Okay, bless you. See you next time.